And welcome to another episode of the Podski. I am your host, the man of 1,000 gimmicks, John Baker, and today we are going to be diving right back into some more professional wrestling talk. Today, I am going to cover my Mount Rushmore of wrestlers, and without further ado, we're going to hop into a new segment this week. It's going to be a recurring segment. It's going to be called the Weekly Roundup, and let's get to it. We're going to start our first ever Weekly Roundup with... This is going to be something that I'm going to try to do every week. It doesn't really necessarily have to be anything within professional wrestling. We're going to bounce around a little bit, but it's that time of the year again. It's football season. So excited for the Dolphins this year. For those of you who don't know, I'm a huge Miami Dolphins fan. There is actually some real excitement this year. They'll probably end up just, being a 500 team. But very excited for the season and can't wait for it to get started. Some other little news and notes. There was something that I'm recording this on a Tuesday. Things came out this morning about WWE contacting a recently released WWE star that is officially signed with AEW, that is very well known. WWE Talent Relations reached out to that person to try to get them to come back to WWE. So that, in and of itself, that sounds like tampering. Not allowed. Kind of ironic I'm mentioning tampering after saying that my favorite team is the Dolphins, considering all of that stuff that came out about the owner a few weeks ago. But not... I wouldn't say I'm surprised, especially with Triple H taking over in creative. I can see them trying to do some things to get people back, especially the ones that were in NXT then left. I don't know who that superstar is that's on the AEW roster. Could be somebody like Swerve, especially since Hit Row came back last week on SmackDown. I doubt that it's somebody like Andrade. Could be Cole. We all know that Cole is a really big Triple H guy. I don't know. We'll see. I'm sure that'll come out in the future as well. Moving on, this Wednesday, tomorrow, marks the start of the trios, or the six-man, not Battle Royal, the trios title tournament in AEW. Very excited to kind of see where that goes. I'm not excited for the fact that they're introducing yet another title. To me, it seems like a little bit too many titles. They're just introducing so many titles like so closely. Like if we spread it out a little bit, it might mean a little more, but there's just an oversaturation of belts, it seems like, in AEW. They should have had trios belts from the start. I know why they waited. We all know why they waited. It's obvious. They're bringing in Omega for a big return. Very excited for Omega to be back. So we got Punk back last week. We got Danielson on Rampage. He'll be in a best 2 out of 3 falls match against Daniel Garcia. And we got CM Punk back. So very, very, very exciting stuff. We're on the road to All Out. It's in a couple more weeks. WWE's making some moves, especially trying to get talent back. They're on their way to Clash at the Castle. A lot of good things happening in wrestling. And a lot of good things happening because it's now fall. We got football season. It's right around the corner, as I mentioned. So we're ripping and we're raring to go. So let's hop right into the pod ski this week. And that was the weekly roundup ski. The Mount Rushmore of professional wrestlers. Let's hop right into it here. My list, pretty typical list, I would assume, from most people. Nothing really kind of stands out from the ordinary. I do want to add some honorable mentions. I feel like that's fair. I'm usually not a big fan of top four. I'm a top five guy. Mount Rushmore, meaning top four, I mean, that's the best of the best, and that totally makes sense. I absolutely get that. Just, you always, it's always hard to just give four names out or four things, and I'm a top five guy. But my honorable mentions, I'll start it off with an interesting one from my perspective. If you knowing like who I am and what I like, that person being John Cena. You have to give Cena his due. He's done it all in the business. He has carried that company through what I would argue is not as bad as it's very recent. It's because I don't like the PG era. The PG era was very boring. It was something I really didn't want as a fan, especially whenever I was in my later teens, early 20s. The PG era was just not what I was looking for. He's now that he's gone, very well missed. I would love to see Cena back in the ring in WWE a lot more often. Hopefully not with that gimmick hairdo that he's got going on now. I'd much rather see him, just let's just. I wouldn't even mind if they just went back and played the hits with Cena now, with because now it's more of a nostalgia act. I'd love for him to just come back, play the hits, or I mean, what a lot of fans would want to see too nowadays, obviously, would be him to do the heel turn. But is there a real reason for him to do a heel turn? I don't know. I think that's like the real big reason why he probably doesn't, because what's the point of it? What's the point of him doing it now? But he's done it all. 16-time champion. He's Cena has to be. I don't think he is a Grand Slam champion. I think I'm correct on that. I don't think he's won the Intercontinental belt. But Cena's done it all. He's carried the company, been the lead guy, everything that McMahon wants. Deserves to be in anybody's top 10 list. Just for me, he's not like the tippy top of the elite. So that's why he's an honorable mention. My other honorable mention is somebody that I mentioned last week's pod in some of my matches that one of my top five matches is Bret Hart. Bret Hart absolutely has to be in your top five. If Bret Hart's not in your top five, it's just because you just hate Bret Hart and all of his stuff that he's done outside the ring and how much he talks about himself. And you got to give it to the guy for being that confident in yourself to like love everything that you've ever done in your life like that, and to literally have an entire basement dedicated to yourself. I like that is. Hats off to him and his confidence in himself, because he absolutely deserves it. Bret has been amazing in his career. I think what keeps Bret off the Mount Rushmore for me is the fact that once he is his injury, he had to retire early. If he wouldn't have had to retire early and he could have came back after WCW and had a run in WWE, I think that would have catapulted him to like maximum. I think Bret would just be remembered very differently than what he's remembered for now. Not that he's remembered for badly. Obviously, he's most remembered for the screw job. But I think history could shine a brighter light on Bret. That Bret now, I believe, is getting a lot of the credit that he deserves, because his in-ring work is just damn incredible. And I love watching Bret matches now. I didn't get it at first. I had to once I got it. I love Bret matches now. A lot of people say you can either be a Bret or a Shawn guy. I would obviously sway a little more towards the Shawn side, but I love Bret now. I love watching Bret matches. They still hold up today, very much like Shawn matches do. They're great and equal in their own right, but I'm talking about Shawn a lot, so I'm giving away a little bit here. Spoiler alert, but I'll just drop right in. My first person on my Mount Rushmore is Shawn Michaels. It has to be. Shawn alone, Sean alone, like, he's had an incredible run, not once but twice, and that can't be forgotten. The fact that he came back and did it, his rise from the Rockers to the Heartbreak Kid, him really breaking out of that tag team wrestling. Clearly, he was the. From friends that I have that lived that era, the New Gen era and the Rockers era, from what I understand is that they thought that Jannetty was the guy. I don't know if that's true. I didn't live in that era, which is really interesting from the fact that Jannetty is completely forgettable now. But that's just because Sean catapulted to heights of like no one could have ever dreamed. And I think what really puts Sean on this list is what kept Brett off the list, is the fact that Sean got hurt in the Rumble of 98, limped his way to WrestleMania 14 with Steve Austin, and then you didn't see him again until SummerSlam 2002, and he literally looked like nothing. It looked like he didn't miss a beat, never missed a step. He got better, which never happens. You think about that. Think of somebody in professional sports. Think of somebody that played football in the NFL and they quit because of an injury and they try to come back 4 years later. The game has passed them by. They'd never make it. It would be a really cool story if they could, but there's literally nobody that's ever stepped away for 4 years and came back and got better and lit it up more than what they did from whenever they did it the first time. And the obvious thing that keeps Sean on the list alone is his WrestleMania catalog. He's Mr. WrestleMania for a reason. You can list his entire WrestleMania catalog is undefeated. A lot of people want to give Undertaker like the streak and all that. That is literally child's play compared to Shawn Michaels' wrestling or WrestleMania catalog. And the WrestleMania catalog does include Undertaker, and I think that's what elevates Undertaker's streak is the two matches they had at WrestleMania 25 and 26. Another great one that Shawn had was at 19 with Jericho. He's just had so many matches at WrestleMania that are so good. The Kurt Angle one, WrestleMania 21, he has to be on your list. He has to be on your Mount Rushmore. There's Sean, just elite talent. Just Sean has to be on your Mount Rushmore. Him, and it's just the things that he did. He did it with the Rockers. He did it with DX. He came back, did it again on his own. Did it again with DX. Like, he has to be on your list. Great addition to the Mount Rushmore. So Shawn Michaels is my first entrant to the Mount Rushmore. We'll follow that up with somebody I mentioned with Sean, Steve Austin. Steve Austin is by far the best character that has ever been in WWE. He's done the most sales in merch by far. Took the business to incredible heights that it hasn't been to since. And by that, I mean like pop culture relevance. Like everybody knows what a Steve Weiser or Austin 316 or the Stone Cold Stunner, everybody can recognize Steve today. And that's what sets Steve apart from everybody, obviously. Everyone knows that. But Steve was a really good wrestler, too. It's not for the fact that he wasn't a good wrestler. He absolutely was a great wrestler. That's why he was called the Ringmaster at one point. His first gimmick in WWE was the Ringmaster. So he's great. The best character. Don't even come at me with that Undertaker stuff, because Steve Austin is 100% Steve. And without Steve needed Vince. But Vince needed Steve, and those two worked together. But just Steve, incredible. Next one is obviously the biggest draw of them all. Hogan absolutely has to be on your list. Hogan Just incredible. You gotta love Hogan. Did it in WWF as Hulk Hogan, the immortal Hulk Hogan. Uh, Turned his back on WCW and joined the Black and White and NWO. Came back to the WWE. Just literally, when you think professional wrestling, you think Hulk Hogan. Is he checks every single box of a professional wrestler, except for the fact that he wasn't going to go out there and have incredible matches, but he was going to sell your tickets. He was going to say your prayers, eat your vitamins, do the pose. Everyone was going to leave happy, and everyone did leave happy. And Hogan will always be remembered as the biggest draw in professional wrestling ever. Just Hogan, just great. The GOAT. But yeah, so my final addition to my Mount Rushmore here should be of no surprise, but it's Ric Flair. Ric Flair just, no one did it for as long as he did at the rate that he did it. By far has had the most matches, the worst schedule, and the hardest schedule of anybody in professional wrestling for all those years. Just up and down the roads, 300 plus days a year, twice in the same day sometimes. Just Hogan, the best. You got to give your hat off to him. He really did it. He even came back, and the older that he got, the bigger star that he came, and that's pretty obvious. That's what happens to a lot of wrestlers. The older they get, the bigger star they become, and all that. But just had his last match a few weeks ago. Hats off to Rick for doing that. The match was a train wreck, very scary to watch as a fan, but you got to give your hat off to somebody that's willing to go out there and do that. I love Rick. He's a little out there now these days, especially because he's not under the WWE umbrella anymore. He can kind of say what he wants. It's a little bit too much sometimes, but Rick he has to be on everybody's Mount Rushmore. Hogan and Rick those are your automatic two. It's depending on who you want to put the rest. And so my Mount Rushmore, Ric Flair, Hulk Hogan, Shawn Michaels, and Steve Austin. If you want to do some more digging into some of these people, everyone's seen matches from these guys. Some of my favorites from each. We'll start with Flair. We'll do Dusty and Flair, Starrcade 85, a great match. A really deep track for Flair that everyone should watch. I know a lot of people do watch, but A Night in Greenville, that is from a Raw from May 19th of 2003. That match is awesome. That is you could tell Flair really wanted to come back and give it to the fans. He did great. If you haven't seen that match, I highly, highly recommend that match. And then everyone's favorite GIF moment from WrestleMania 24, Flair and Shawn Michaels. If you don't love that match, you don't love wrestling. As mentioned before with Shawn Michaels, his WrestleMania catalog, just dive into some Shawn Michaels WrestleMania. You'll know what I'm talking about. He's definitely on the list. Again, Austin, some of his really good. Most of Austin's best matches were WrestleMania, and that's because they were building up to a huge story where they told her. There was the build of a story and a culmination, basically. So, WrestleMania 13, obviously WrestleMania 17, the biggest WrestleMania of them all, and WrestleMania 19, the swan song for Steve. Even though a lot of us didn't know that was going to be at the end for him, but it was. And SummerSlam 98, the one with Undertaker, that's another really great match too. Hogan, WrestleManias 1 through 9, because they were all built around him. The Bash 96, obviously, you got to include that. That's not even a match. That's just a moment like the biggest moment of professional wrestling on camera. Him turning from the red and yellow to the black and white. WrestleMania 18, Icon versus Icon, him and Rock. Great match. You have to love that match. And Starrcade 97, the biggest event that was supposed to be for WCW ever. That story was an incredible story. It took a long, long time to tell. Totally worth it. Match wasn't that great, but in the end, at that point, it wasn't about the match. It was about the moment, and we got the moment. And that's what's important. So, but yeah, that's my Mount Rushmore, and let's wrap this bad boy up. All right, and that was my Mount Rushmore of professional wrestling. Let me know what you think. I am now on Twitter at _Podski. Let me know how my list was. Was it the shits? Was it great? Let me know what your list was. Hit me up. Let me know. Let's chat. Let's see what's going on. Check me out on Twitter at _Podski. Give a little preview, and next week we're going to come back with another pod. We're going to step outside of the ropes of professional wrestling. We are going to check out and review a documentary that I just recently watched on Netflix. It is about Woodstock 99. Completely in love with this documentary, from all of the acts to the devastation, the fallout, and all that. So we'll cover that next week. Woodstock 99 on the Podski.